Okay, so the idea of this video here is just to be able to take you through a patch for a January jam that I put together just a couple of days back, and I wanted to share the patch because what came of it, but also that it's actually a pretty simple patch in many ways to generate the heart of this patch, which is basically the percussive rhythmic element that is something that I really liked. And yes, I added a kick on top of it later on, but where I originally started was by trying to create something what would sound like the sound of the sea. Maybe if you're at a beach and you're hearing, you know, the waves or just the movement of water at a distance. That's what I started with. So what you're hearing now, if I turn up the filter, which is right down right now, and I turn it up, which is obviously not the sound of the sea, but it starts that way. So let's just walk through this patch at the basic level, and we're going to take all the CV modulation out of the filter to start off with, and we're going to start on the filter itself. So what we have is a sine in going in to one of the ins on the ladder filter. The ladder filter actually has three different ins, so it acts as a kind of mixer to what's going into the filter itself. And if we were just to hear the noise only from this oscillator, which has a noise out as well as multiple, it's a dual oscillator, but I'm just using just the noise out, and we'll just like listen to that, which is on the first channel until we start opening up the filter. So that's just noise. That's a little bit of a mix of pink noise, mostly pink noise with white noise, and then I have another pink noise into the third channel, which happens to be coming from a module called the Behringer 150, which is a kind of utility type module. Let me add that to it. Now what you're hearing is the noise coming in and out. That is coming from an envelope that is being generated from the math, which is then basically controlling the VCA, the volume of the VCA through an envelope. But we'll talk about that math envelope in a second. So what we're hearing back again is just two types of noise. It was my starting point. I was like trying to get the sound of the sea, like I said earlier. So then what we want to do is automate this twisting that I'm doing with my hand over the cutoff, and that is coming from a modulation source, which is the Maestro. But as you can tell, and you can hear, the original intent was to have a kind of slow movement, but as I put it in there, and what I have is basically on the second channel of the Maestro is a pattern that is opening up that filter in a pretty quick way. And that's when I started to move away from just having something that sounded like a slow moving sea movement or sound into something that was a little more rhythmic. I then decided to just see what was going to happen if I started to like plug in other modulation to. The ladder filter has something called well, it's basically the 1/3 CV. Now normally that's used for keyboard tracking, something honestly I don't understand that well, but as often is the case in Modular, you try something, you just plug it in and see what happens. The CV in is you can't maybe quite see it here, but it's basically a clock with the divisions are getting modulated, and that's generating a gate out of a certain rhythm. So I have a sequencer called the Metron, which is then creating a sequence into the clock divisions of that fourth channel of the quad clock distributor by 4 ms, and then I'm taking that out of that and then using that to modulate that tracking CV. Then I've got another modulation source which I then plug into the second of that CV, and that is basically just another sequence that's coming out of a gate every so often, but in a rhythmic way. And when I add that, that's creating this like almost like a snare sound on the downbeat of something, if you could imagine there was a kick. And that was exciting because I was starting to get something, I was starting to get like rhythmic, percussive. I was adding more than just the slow, slow moving C sound. I've also then got a sine going into another channel into the filter, which isn't supposed to be part of the C sound, but when I add it, adds just another layer of texture. And now I've got something that just in this single module, just by turning a couple of knobs, I'm able to change the characteristics and the emphasis of certain parts, which is a single voice but has a lot of movement and a lot of potential, just both manually and through modulation. You can hear there's a delay going on there, which is dual looping delay that adds a little more to the sound. Okay, so that's the sound source. Now we're talking about the VCA. The VCA, nothing fancy about it. The only thing that's really going on here on the VCA is a slow moving, basically volume control that is being generated through an envelope, where the envelope is modifying the amplitude on the VCA through this math patch that I've got. So I'll be brief about the math patch just because, again, it was kind of accidental. I didn't mean to arrive at it, but it has this interesting kind of in and out feeling to this particular voice. And so what I have is, I'm just using only the 2 channels. I have a trigger in to the second channel out from the sequencer. It's not a 4x4, but it's something over a 16 set pattern that is creating the trigger. It's starting off the envelope. I have the rise being modulated of that envelope through an LFO square wave that I've got being clocked, triggered by another modulator, which is a saw wave, which just hits the peak and it's telling us how quickly that LFO should be moving. And then the output of that is a square wave, which has got a almost like a gate function onto the rise. Then we're taking the envelope out of channel 2, and then we're taking that to then trigger the first channel on math. The nature of the envelope is that it has enough of an edge on the envelope to then cause a trigger to occur on channel 1. Channel 1 then has also another modulation on the rise coming from, just remind myself, where is that coming from? Yeah, so that's coming from basically two different patterns using switchblade to alternate. So we're getting this kind of movement onto the envelope, on the second envelope, that is somewhat predictable, but it's just not obvious, let's say. And then I'm using another channel out from Maestro to then switch from one CV source to the other over time. This is basically a switch. That out then is going and modulating, like I say, the rise, and then eventually we take the envelope out of that first channel, which you're able to see maybe what you're seeing now is basically the envelope that is being generated by math. I'm sending that then to the VCA on the CV, so that's basically controlling the volume, and this is why we're hearing something and then not over time. So you can see the pattern that's being generated, and it's moving. It's not the same every single time. There's enough interaction between the different modulation sources to create something that feels like it's moving. And then it's a combination. Well, then ultimately you can start playing this as an instrument, mixing in more or less of the two voices, of rather the two noises, plus the sine wave, emphasizing maybe more the sine, and then using the octave switch on the oscillator to just make little changes here and there, having a little bit more of the delay on it, so I can make it a little sharper. And then, you know, we just add a fresh little kick to that. So just wanted to share that with you, because this is an example of, I started somewhere with an intent, the C, this movement of the C, but then just adding additional modulation to that, you're starting to create a new kind of percussive sound and feel, and was pretty happy with the result. So I hope you enjoyed this video, got something out of it. Let me know if you have any questions or even corrections about any of my descriptions here. I hope you enjoyed. Thanks very much.